Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Pilgrims on the Digital Way. It's episode 4. My name is Uncle Traveling Matt, or Matt Poynton is my real name. And with me, as always, is...
I'm Mary Michelle. Hello, everyone.
Right, and so, yes, another week has passed. We've had lots of interest in our last video. I thought what
Yes.
we'd do, as always, Mary Michelle, is just have a look at the last video. We've got a comment.
All right. Let's hear it, Matt.
So it's from @SnowSumley, and it says it's so interesting that facing fears is present for both an external pilgrimage journey as well as an internal retreat journey. Of course, we were talking about the difference between a pilgrimage and a retreat last week, weren't we?
Yes.
It feels there's a relationship between both chosen paths. Choosing to take time outside of regular life for a sacred experience. Do you think that fear is more in the preparation mind, or are you finding that you end up facing fears when you are in process? Is overcoming fear a major part of pilgrimage? I wonder if that makes you feel stronger for overcoming fear and allowing the path to lead you. What's the scariest thing you faced on pilgrimage? Well, that's not a comment. That's almost like
Oh
a
my
whole
goodness.
library.
That's a whole bunch of great questions, Matt. Well, if we were going to look at that, you would be the one, obviously, to answer about the actual fear on a pilgrimage. I'm going to guess this comment is from a woman. And I'm wondering what sort of fears, do we need to talk about what fears you might confront on a pilgrimage? It would be, but I think aren't we next week going to look at preparing for a pilgrimage?
Well, that was one of our ideas. So I do think the one about like what's the scariest thing on a pilgrimage. I think we'll deal with that later because I think that could be a good episode.
Sure.
So Snowson Lee, thank you for that. And it's not that we're trying to bat it away, but there is a lot in your comment there. I think
Well,
fear. Yeah, please.
Go ahead, Matt. Go ahead. What were you
I
going to
think
say?
fear is a massive part, at least for me personally. Fears are a massive part, and overcoming fears. And they say that pilgrimage is life in microcosm. And I think one of the biggest things about growing up is facing our fears, or at least hopefully. I mean, because I think some people don't face the fears and they suffer in later life because of it, because the fears only multiply. Like if you don't face your demons, those demons just multiply and get stronger. And I've seen it with people who face their fears and overcome them, and that gives them a much healthier older age. Whereas people who haven't, often a lot of anxiety there and that kind of stuff. But because it's easier, I think so much is to do with childhood as well. Like if you were taught to be confident and you were taught to face them in childhood, it's easier than if you have to learn in adulthood. But we can all do it. We can all do it. And certainly for me, pilgrimage was about facing fears. And for some people, it's that like being alone. For some people, it's, the strange place or the strange food. None of that bothered me. But what bothers me is, I'm quite a large person, is the physical exercise. I've always shied away from physical exercise. So when I was very young, I was very ill, and they fed me a cocktail of drugs to get over it, and it was cured. It was a form of epilepsy, but what that meant is my coordination was out, so I was never very good at PE and games at school. And what I realize now, I didn't realize it at the time, is I instinctively just shied away from all of that because I was never any good at it. And what that meant is physical exercise has always been that unspoken fear. And the Camino Frances, for example, the very first day is possibly the hardest, where you have to cross the Pyrenees.
Right, I've heard that.
And it petrified me, and I was having like nightmares for nights before, and I almost turned back, which is another story. But yeah, that's my comment on that.
Okay, well, that's interesting, Matt. That certainly it makes sense to focus on the physical aspect of a pilgrimage on foot, or even using some other way is absolutely grueling. I imagine, and by all accounts. And I'm sure that most people fear being able to maintain the goals and pace that they've set themselves. I would guess you wouldn't want to be overconfident on that one either. But I'm remembering a couple of things. First, I'm still thinking about the comment, Matt. And you actually wrote a really great article about fear. And did we talk about it last week?
No.
No. So I would actually, can you put the link
Yeah.
in the description when you publish this video so that the people, the commenter and people can read that, because it's very interesting what you said about fear. Okay, so we'll remember to do that. The
Yeah.
other
So
thing I
it
wanted to
was
mention, sorry,
called
go ahead, love.
me and Bobby McGee and Brendan.
Oh, it was that one.
And it was
Okay.
about the Janis
Sorry, I couldn't
Joplin
remember the
song
title.
and about Saint Brendan. So
Okay. So
yeah.
it was the one we mentioned last week as well. Sorry, I just couldn't remember the title, love. So also in response to that comment, it's very interesting because it does say, it does mention the fact that we have to prepare for this journey. And is there more fear then? Well, that's the fear of the unknown, which actually, when you posted your article, Matt, there was a great comment. And this was on the Facebook page for St. Francis Way. So I don't know how we can pull that all together, but there was a great comment about facing our own, just what you described, inner demons. So the only thing I want to add at this right now, about last week's episode, and also having to do a little bit with that comment, is that we talked about the difference between retreats and pilgrimages. And we agreed in the broadest terms that a pilgrimage is a normally very long walk, often to a foreign land, and usually on foot. Although bikes, horses, all sorts of things come into play, for the purpose of a spiritual experience, and usually involving a visit to a site that's sacred to one culture or another. So what I want to say about where they're the same is the idea of stepping out. You talked about this from the very beginning, Matt, the need to have some time out from life, from not just from problems, but even just from routine. And I mean, our lives are wonderful, but sometimes it can start to feel like drudgery, and sometimes we question some choices that we have made or are making, and we wonder, what may lie ahead. And is it, how do you plan for that? And I think that there's this very strong intention to turn that off, that daily routine, that who we are, all those roles and identities and hats that we wear, we're parents, we're siblings, we're grandchildren, we have all these, we have careers, we're teachers, so it's an opportunity in both the pilgrimage and a retreat to simply just not be those things, and to just be. And I think, and I would use the word authentic has been horribly overused for a lot of the wrong reasons. So is the word transformative. But I think we're all happier when we have a better sense of what that authentic self and authentic life looks like for ourselves. And some of us don't even actually have an idea of what that looks like, or haven't even thought about that. And I think we would have I think for me, we're a happier society, community, family, when people have that kind of time to devote to those kinds of questions and a need for guidance. It takes time. It takes time out. It takes that quietness. It takes stepping out. Anyway, sorry, I've gone on too long, but I wanted to say that about both of those.
Okay.
Because they both have a strong intention.
I think it's a valid point.
We're doing something radically different right now.
Okay.
Okay.
What are we doing? What is the question for today, Mary Michelle?
Okay. Question for today. That's a good question, Matt. So our question for today is, it's a little bit connected to next week as well, is planning a pilgrimage. And how would you choose where you want to go? So obviously, we all know, we all think of the Camino,
Mhm.
or the Camino de Santiago, but what what do you think about that, Matt? Should people just go on the Camino? Should they look for, like, how would you advise a person who wants to go on a pilgrimage?
Okay, so how do you choose your pilgrimage? Is that what we're
Sure.
saying? Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Well, I mean, firstly, okay, let's go with the obvious. So the obvious is talked about Camino de Santiago, but of course, Camino de Santiago is a plethora of routes that all lead to Santiago. But the one that most people think of is the Camino Frances from Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port or Roncesvalles or Leon or wherever you started, Sarria being the shortest point. And to Santiago. And that's the one that's in the film The Way, which for a lot of people is the introduction, but also
Okay.
in books like Paulo Coelho's The Pilgrimage, which is an introduction for some people. And there was one by Shirley, what was her name? That was a very famous
the Shirley
one.
MacLaine one?
Shirley MacLaine. So that's the one when you say Camino, that's what most people say. I've walked that one. I walked it from Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port. The first question, if you choose that one, is where do you start? And a lot of that is about time, and it's about how you want to do it. To walk from Saint-Jean, I think you need, I mean, there's 33 stages in the guidebook, but they also advise rest days, and you need a day or two at the end or the beginning, just for logistically. So you're looking at 40 days. Can you take 40 days out of life? And not everybody can do that.
Yeah,
Now,
most people can't, I don't think.
yeah, I did it in stages. I wanted to do it in one go and realized that I would be putting it off and putting it off and putting it off if I did that. So I did it in stages. I don't regret that because I feel like I got 4 different pilgrimages by doing it in 4 stages. So,
Sure, of course you did.
yeah, so I would say don't be against the idea of doing it in stages. If the stages
break it up,
yeah, because the other thing is, some people say, "Well, I've
okay,
only got a
that's a
week.
good piece of advice.
I've only got a week. I'll start at Sarria." The Sarria is the bit. If you go on the message boards, there's a lot of
Yeah,
moaning, right? And I
yeah.
don't want to sound too
Is that
cruel.
that's the last part
Yeah,
before you get to the cathedral?
and a lot of the moaning is about that being busy, and a lot
Yeah.
of the people who've done it from wherever don't like that bit because now I didn't find the crowds were so bad, and in a future
Yeah.
episode I will give tips on how to avoid some of those crowds.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's like what I will say is, if you're not choosing Frances because you've read the notice boards and you think, there was a stuff about Turagrinos recently. I wrote an article about it actually.
Yes.
And if I'd read that, I might think, oh my God, I don't want to do this. And I think don't be put off by those articles because those comments are often written by people who've done a lot of pilgrimages or they did it way back when and now it's not the same. And it's not as bad as it sounds on the message boards. I don't recognize that experience. That said, I didn't go in August.
Yes. Well, and choosing the time of year is certainly relevant, and certainly because you have to come through a mountain pass if you're doing that bit. The time of year and the weather is doubly important.
Yeah,
I would think.
But it equally can be. I mean, I think when it's too hot, it's very difficult to walk.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah,
particularly the
not in August.
So, I mean, one nice thing with the Saint Jean or the Roncesvalles start is that they traditionally say it's 3 stages, and the first part is for the body, the second part is for the mind, and the third part is for the spirit. And that's probably quite nice, and I think there's truth in that. I certainly think the Meseta, which some people skip, is good for the mind. But I mean, like when I was doing it, I met a lot, particularly French walkers that started in Le Puy in France, And that is double the distance. Now, so that means you need like probably 70 days to do it, which is even longer. But if you can do it, all the Le Puy walkers rave about it.
Yes.
So, you know, you could start, you know, I know people have started in Leon and that, and it's been great. But remember, there are other Caminos. There's a Camino Portuguese, which is still quite a busy one, but it's meant to be very good. There's seems to be getting more popular is Del Norte, which follows the Frances, but on the coast more.
Yeah.
More challenging, and Via de la Plata, which goes to the middle of Spain. The problem with them is there isn't the amount of accommodation, and logistically it can be a lot harder. What's great about Frances is logistically it's a doddle. You turn up, do it. You don't need to think about your accommodation stuff. Now, and the path is well marked, stuff like that.
Okay.
So,
sorry, Matt. Well, those are some really great tips. Thanks so much. Like, don't be afraid to break it up. And as Matt said, probably if you do that, each one's going to be obviously a different experience and potentially a brand new pilgrimage. Do that and also explore the fact that there are many roads that lead to the Cathedral of Santiago in Santiago, which is the Camino is the way, is the path. But there are multiple paths because people came from all over. They came from all over Europe. They came from England as well by ship to certain points on the French coast and even the northern Spanish coast. So there are many, many. And what's interesting at what Matt said about the accommodations, because, you know, there's been such a renewal of interest in this that people have gone to the history books and the archives in churches and parish offices and so on. And they have figured out where people used to walk based on ancient documents to recreate some of these walks.
Can I say something? Because this is very important when we're talking about choosing your pilgrimage.
You
don't have to do a Camino. I mean, I'm doing the Way of St. Francis through Italy at the moment. There are also pilgrimage routes in almost every country. I mean, certainly in Britain there is, and you were talking about ones in North America that have been started.
Yeah.
One of the big problems, and this is a kind of class or socioeconomic thing, is if you're not in the Camino, it can be a lot more expensive because you're paying a lot more for accommodation. So the cost of the Way of St. Francis was much higher than the Camino Frances because you're paying 40, 60 euros a night for accommodation because they're on the dormitories.
You're paying tourism rates, not pilgrim rates.
Yeah. And that's a big problem if I want to do stuff in Britain because you stay overnight and you £70, £80. It's a lot of money.
You have to stay at a bed and breakfast, right, Matt?
It's big money, you know. Or you carry your tent with you, which, you know, some people do, but that's not always an option for everyone. And you can do day pilgrimages. There's a lot around Ireland, actually. You know, that are circular, that are day ones. But I do think there is something about the rhythm of several days where you're getting your body in shape, and I don't think one day can cut it.
It's a different experience, it sounds like. You have to include sort of maybe a night or two of roughing it or semi-roughing it a bit.
I find it takes about 6 to 7 days for my body to really get in the rhythm.
Okay, interesting. So that's interesting, Matt. There are the ones that we know. But here's the thing. In the old days, when people would set out on a pilgrimage, it started when they stepped out their front door.
Yeah.
And people would gather in villages and towns together so that they could travel together for different reasons. But people came literally from all over Europe. And they went the other direction, too. They went to Rome so that they also crisscrossed Italy. So,
and they also went home after. They also walked home after.
Right? Yes, they did. So it was a very different Europe in those days. You know, the boundaries were different. The access was different. And you could actually walk across Europe quite freely in some ways. Yes, and I think we're just about done for today, Matt. Did you want to add anything?
No, I just thank you for everyone who's kept watching. If you've got any comments, leave them in the box. and keep
We'd
traveling.
love to hear.
Stay on the path.
Yes, we'll have more for you next week. Bye for now.